In order to prove that the second message of Islam, at the Medinian period, is the final message of Muhammad to mankind, let us state briefly the doctrine of abrogation, which is known among Muslim scholars as nasikh and mansukh, the abrogator and the abrogated. Abrogation is defined by the Merriam-Webster's dictionary as the annulling of a former law by an act of the legislative power, by constitutional authority, or by religious authority. Accordingly, all Muslim scholars collectively agreed upon that the Meccan verses of the Quran are abrogated by the Medinian verses of the Quran and the Hadiths. Therefore, the so-called peaceful Meccan message is abrogated by the violent Medinian message. The Quran testified to the fact that some of its verses are abrogated and substituted by other verses. When we substitute one revelation for another, and Allah knows best what He reveals, in stages, they say, "Thou art but a forger," but most of them understand not. Surah Al-Nahl 16, 101. Again it says, "None of our revelations do we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better or similar. Knowest thou not that Allah hath power over all things?" Surah Al-Baqarah 2, 106. Now let us look at sample of the verses of the Quran that abrogated other verses of the Quran and what some Muslim scholars have said about them. Let us begin with the infamous verse of the sword, "But when the forbidden months are past, then slay the pagans wherever ye find them, and seize them, beleaguer them, and lie in wait for them in every stratagem of war, but if they repent, that means they become Muslims, and establish regular prayers, perform the Islamic daily 5 prayers, and practice regular charity, pay the Islamic zakat, then open the way for them, for Allah is often forgiving, most merciful." Surah Al-Tawbah 9, 5. This verse is known among Muslim scholars as the verse of the sword and also called the mother of all abrogating verses because it abrogated 124 of the Meccan verses that spoke about a peaceful approach, no compulsion in religion, and granting freedom of faith to infidels. It is mentioned in the last supposedly revealed surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Tawbah 9. The fourth rightly guided caliph, Ali ibn Abi Talib, said to the judge Abdel Rahman ibn Awf before sending him to be a governor of Yemen, "Can you differentiate between abrogating and abrogated verses?" Abdel Rahman said, "No." Thereupon Ali said, "Thou art damned and causes others to be damned." The words of the Caliph Ali show us how seriously the immediate companions of Prophet Muhammad took the doctrine of abrogation. According to the Muslim scholar Ibn al-Arabi, everything in the Quran which speaks about forgiveness for infidels and avoiding killing them have been abrogated by the verse of the sword. This verse has abrogated 124 verses, Al-Islamiyat, Al-Kimni 2001, page 59. Ibn Kathir said in his commentary on Surah Al-Tawbah 9, 5, Al-Dahaq said, "This verse abrogated every treaty of peace between the Prophet and unbelievers." The Muslim scholar, Ali ibn Talha said, Ibn Abbas, this is the cousin of Muhammad, said about Al-Tawbah 9, 5 that Allah ordered the Prophet to put the sword, means to kill by the sword, on everyone who refused to accept Islam. Dr. M. Khan, the translator of Sahih Bukhari and the Quran into English, writes, Allah revealed in Surah Bara'at 9, 5, Surah Al-Tawbah also called Surah Bara'at, the order to discard all obligations, covenants, etc., and commanded the Muslims to fight against all the pagans as well as against the people of the scriptures, Jews and Christians, if they do not embrace Islam, till they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued, as it is revealed in Surah Al-Tawbah 9, 29. So, the Muslims are not permitted to abandon the fighting against them, pagans, Jews and Christians, and to reconcile with them and to suspend hostilities against them for an unlimited period while they are strong and have the ability to fight against them. So, at first the fighting was forbidden, then it was permitted, and after that it was made obligatory. M. Khan, Introduction to English Translation of Sahih Bukhari, page 14. Dr. Khan continues, the mujahideen who fight against the enemies of Allah in order that the worship should be all for Allah and that the word is Allah's should be uppermost. Commenting on some verses of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, 191, 193, Surah Al-Nisa 4, 76, 89, 91, Surah Al-Tawbah 9, 5, 12, 14, 29, and Surah Al-Anfal 8, 39, the Egyptian Muslim scholar, Khalil Abdul Karim states, these verses carry serious orders for killing of tribes refusing to believe in the faith that is preached by Muhammad. And from the other side, there are hadiths issued by the Prophet that confirm this meaning very clearly, by which we mean killing anyone who refuses Islam. The Prophet Muhammad said, I have been ordered by Allah to fight the people until they bear witness that there is no God except Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If they say it, they uphold from me their wealth and blood. In plain language, the price of non-compliance for anyone who refuses to witness or utter the two Shi'ita Islamic creed, is to lose all protection for his wealth and blood. Accordingly, the killing of one who refuses to utter the two Shi'ita is an obligation to every Muslim without exception. The message of Muhammad to all the tribes is accept Islam and you will be safe. Any tribe or an individual who refuses this offer would expose himself to physical annihilation, and his wealth, women, children, and slave girls would be taken by the Muslims. Khalil Abdul Karim 1999, pages 42 to 44. As we mentioned, killing the people of the book, Jews and Christians, was not sanctioned when Muhammad was in Mecca. At that time, the Quran instructed Muhammad to discuss matters with them in a friendly manner. In this regard the Quran says, and dispute ye not with the people of the book, except with means better than mere disputation, unless it be with those of them who inflict wrong and injury, but say, we believe in the revelation which has come down to us and in that which came down to you. Surah Al-Ankabut 29, 46. The Muslim scholar, Al-Nisaburi said, this verse is abrogated by the verse of the Quran which says, fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of the truth, of the people of the book, Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission, and feel themselves subdued. Surah Al-Tawbah 9, 29, Nazik and Mansuk, Al-Nisaburi, page 35. First of all, this verse is translated in a way to make it less offensive to the English readers. The well-known translator of the Quran, Yusuf Ali, is notoriously known for rendering the harsh and hostile tone of the verses of the Quran in order to make them sound more palatable to the English reader. This verse in the original language, Arabic, never uses the phrase willing submission, nor does it say, feel themselves subdued. The real meaning of the verse in Arabic can be summarized as follows: Muslims have to fight and kill the Jews and Christians because they have rejected the religion of truth, Islam, preached by Muhammad. Their killing is also sanctioned because they do not forbid what Islam forbids. For example, Christians eat pork and that is forbidden in Islam. Jews and Christians must either accept Islam, pay the jizya in gold, or be killed. Obey, pay, or die. If they refuse to accept Islam and agree to pay the jizya, then they have to pay the jizya on their knees, and that after have been defeated and degraded. In fact, the third option of paying the jizya is not an individual choice in which one Christian pays and the other does not pay. It is a treaty to be signed between the Muslim conquerors, Mujahideen, and the defeated and degraded Christians or Jews. The well-renowned commentator, Ibn Kathir, commenting on the above verse, states, Christians living among Muslims must be persecuted, harassed, degraded, and treated as second citizens and inferiors to Muslims. Ibn Kathir included in his commentary the notorious Umayyan Pact, which the second caliph, Omar ibn al-Khattab, had forced the Christians of Najran to sign after his troops invaded their lands and defeated them. Najran today is a city in southwestern of Saudi Arabia and near the border of Yemen. I am quoting only the first article of this unfair treaty. You can get the whole treaty in the internet, which is made up of 27 articles. The first article shows what the Christians are forced to write: we shall not build, in our cities or our neighborhood, new monasteries, churches, convents, or monks' cells, nor shall we repair by day or night, such of them as fall in ruins or as situated in the quarters of Muslims. Notice that the treaty forbids Christians to neither build new churches nor repair their existing ones. According to the Sharia, if Christians build a new church after Muslim mujahideen invaded their land and occupied it, that church must be destroyed by Muslims. Today, in the so-called secular Muslim countries such as Egypt and Malaysia, Christians have great difficulty getting building permits for churches, so many of them buy up shop lots and factory lots and register them as social centers or schools. By the way, secular Muslim countries or people is an oxymoron sentence, just like saying Muslim terrorists are peace-loving and law-abiding people. Although Egypt is not following the Sharia law, still if a Coptic church's washroom or window is broken, the Copts are not allowed by the law of the country to repair it until they get permission from the Ministry of Religious Affairs, which might take months. Most of the existing churches in the Middle East and North Africa were built at the time when the British were ruling those countries, namely Egypt, Sudan, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. But today the governments of those countries are openly forbidding the construction of any new churches. Before we continue with the doctrine of abrogation, we need to explain what the Quran means by the word jizya. The jizya literally means legal and religious penalty imposed by the Islamic law on the defeated people of the book. The people of the book is applied on Christians and Jews, and later on the great Mughal Empire Akbar extended to Hindus. Jews and Christians living in a Muslim countries are required by the Quran, Surah 9:29, to pay the jizya or else be killed if they refuse to embrace Islam. Christians and Jews are called the people of the book and also called the Tsimis. Paying the jizya is a symbol of humiliation and submission because Tsimis are not regarded as citizens of the Islamic State, although they are, in most cases, natives to the Muslim countries. Sheikh Naji Ibrahim ibn Abdullah summarizes the purpose of the jizya. He says, quoting Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, that the jizya is enacted, to spare the blood, of the Tsimis, Jews and Christians, to be a symbol of humiliation of the infidels and as an insult and punishment to them, and as the Shafi'ites indicate, the jizya is offered in exchange for residing in an Islamic country. Thus Ibn Qayyim adds, since the entire religion belongs to God, it aims at humiliating ungodliness and its followers, and insulting them. Imposing the jizya on the followers of ungodliness and oppressing them is required by God's religion. The Quranic text hints at this meaning when it says, until they give the tribute by force with humiliation. Quran 9:29. According to Muslim jurists, the following legal ordinances must be enforced on Tsimis, Christians and Jews, who reside among Muslims. 1. Tsimis are not allowed to build new churches, temples, or synagogues. They are allowed to renovate old churches or houses of worship provided they do not allow to add any new construction. Old churches are those which existed prior to Islamic conquests and are included in a peace accord by Muslims. Construction of any church, temple, or synagogue in the Arab Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, is prohibited. It is the land of the Prophet and only Islam should prevail there. Yet, Muslims, if they wish, are permitted to demolish all non-Muslim houses of worship in any land they conquer. 2. Tsimis are not allowed to pray or read their sacred books out loud at home or in churches, lest Muslims hear their prayers. 3. Tsimis are not allowed to print their religious books or sell them in public places and markets. They are allowed to publish and sell them among their own people, in their churches and temples. 4. Tsimis are not allowed to install the cross on their houses or churches since it is a symbol of infidelity. 5. Tsimis are not permitted to broadcast or display their ceremonial religious rituals on radio or television or to use the media or to publish any picture of their religious ceremonies in newspaper and magazines. 6. Tsimis are not allowed to congregate in the streets during their religious festivals, rather, each must quietly make his way to his church or temple. 7. Tsimis are not allowed to join the army unless there is indispensable need for them, in which case they are not allowed to assume leadership positions but are considered mercenaries. According to Ibn Qayyim, author of the multi-volume rules for the Tsimis, it is obligatory to destroy or convert into a mosque every church both old and new that exists on lands that were taken by Muslims through force, for they breed corruption. Even if Muslims are not sure whether one of these things churches is old pre-conquest or new, it is better to err on the side of caution, treat it as new, and demolish it. Likewise, Ibn Taymiyyah confirms that the ulama scholars of the Muslims from all four schools of law Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, and others, including Al-Thawri, Al-Layth, all the way back to the companions of the Prophet, and the followers are all agreed that if the Imam destroys every church in lands taken by force, through jihad, such as Egypt, Sudan, Iraq, Syria, this would not be deemed unjust of him, adding that, if Christians resist, they forfeit their covenant, their lives, and their possessions. Elsewhere he writes, wherever Muslims live and have mosques, it is impermissible for any sign of infidelity to be present, churches or otherwise. Echoing the words of the jurists that the church is worse than bars and brothels and houses of torment and fire, in August 2009, Dar al-Ifta, an Al-Azhar affiliate, issued a fatwa likening the building of a church to a nightclub, a gambling casino, or building a barn for rearing pigs, cats, or dogs. In July 2012, Dr. Yasir al-Burhami, a prominent figure in Egypt's Salaf movement, issued a fatwa forbidding Muslim taxi drivers and bus drivers from transporting Coptic Christian priests to their churches, which he depicted as more forbidden than taking someone to a liquor bar. The bloody verse of the sword, Surah 9:5, is supported by other verses, in which the Quran clearly declares that God would not accept any religion other than Islam. If anyone desires a religion other than Islam, submission to Allah, never will it be accepted of him, and in the hereafter he will be in the ranks of those who have lost all spiritual good. Al-Imran 3:85. Do they seek for other than the religion of Allah, while all creatures in the heavens and on earth have, willing or unwilling, bowed to his will, accepted Islam, and to him shall they all be brought back. Al-Imran 3:83. The religion before Allah is Islam, submission to his will. Al-Imran 3:19. Muhammad preached his new religion in Mecca, and for 13 years he had gained 73 converts. During that period the Quran stated very clearly that there is to be no compulsion in religion, Surah 2:256. After he fled to Medina and after his victory at the Battle of Badr, Muhammad turned around 180 degrees with a new doctrine. Besides the usual forbidden freedom of faith and Islam being the only acceptable religion to God, the execution of those unwilling to embrace Islam, the forfeiture of their property, cattle, women, and children to be distributed among Muslim troops, the Jews and the Christians, the people of the book, somehow were exempted with some conditions. For the Jews and Christians the Quran states, "Fight those who believe neither in Allah nor the last day, nor hold the forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission, and feel themselves subdued." Quran, Al-Tawbah 9:29. Islam requires complete submission from the Jews and the Christians. At that time, the Jews were seen as great threat to the new religion because they have heavenly book and religious constitution, and this matter made them to be the living heavenly denial to the prophecy of the Arab prophet who claims that his religion comes from the same sources as that of the Jews. Therefore, the existence of the Jews in Arabia became permanent and real threat to the new state and its ideologies. Accordingly, it became necessary to expel them from Yathrib and cut their roots. And this matter was carried out without delay and without compromise. Thus, followed the massacres and expulsion of the Jews from their cities Yathrib, Medina, and Khaybar. The same massacres would have been imposed on the Christians if they happened to be in Medina. For the Quran equates the Christians with the Jews because it sees them friends to each other and a great threat to Muhammad's claim as the last prophet. O you who believe! Take not the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are friends one to another. He among you who taketh them for friends is one of them. Lo Allah guideth not wrongdoing folk. Quran Al-Ma'idah 5:51. The Jews call Uzair son of God, and the Christians call Christ the Son of God. That is a saying from their mouth, in this, they but intimate what the unbelievers of old used to say. Allah's curse be on them, how they are deluded away from the truth. Quran Al-Tawbah 9:30. They do blaspheme who say, the original Arabic text says kafro, which means they became infidels. God is Christ the son of Mary. But said Christ, O children of Israel, worship God, my Lord and your Lord. Whoever joins other gods with God, God will forbid him the garden, and the fire will be his abode. There will for the wrongdoers be no one to help. They do blaspheme, they became infidels, who say, God is one of three in a trinity, for there is no God except one God. If they desist not from their word of blasphemy, verily a grievous penalty will befall the blasphemers among them. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:72-73. Some Muslims today, the so-called moderate Muslims, try to show that Islam is a religion of peace, love, patience, tolerance, and one that advocates freedom of faith. In order to prove their point, they quote the abrogated verses of the Quran. These are the Meccan verses discussed earlier, believed to have been revealed to the Prophet of Islam when he was in Mecca. The verses that forbade freedom of faith and made Islam is the only acceptable religion to Allah are known as the Medinian verses. According to the historian Bat Yetter, Islam looks at a non-Muslim country such as America and its inhabitants as the lands of non-believers, called Dar al-Harb, the land of war, where infidels are to be engaged in conflict because they oppose the establishment of Islamic law, Sharia, in their own lands. As enemies of Allah, they are accorded no rights and are fair game, mubah, for all Muslims. They can be taken as slaves, kidnapped for ransom, robbed, raped, maimed or killed with impunity. War is to be waged against them in order to Islamize their territory, which according to the beliefs of Islam, must be conquered for Allah. If they resist, Islamic law provides for the deportation or massacre of the men and enslavement of women and children. Prophet Muhammad claims that Allah orders him, and all his followers, to kill anyone who refuses to accept him as the messenger of Allah, and this he confirms in one of his authentic hadiths. Allah's apostle said, I have been ordered, by Allah, to fight against all people until they testify that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That means to utter the Shahada indicating their acceptance of Islam, and offer the prayers perfectly, pray regularly 5 times in the day, and give the obligatory charity, pay the zakat. So if they perform that, accept Islam and practice Islamic rituals, then they save their lives and properties from me except for Islamic laws, and then their reckoning, accounts, will be done by Allah. Sahih al-Bukhari. From this we can conclude that there is nothing called moderate Islam and by extension, moderate Muslims. The final message of Islam is a violent message, accept Islam or you will die, and this is what the Muslim terrorists are striving to establish and achieve everywhere in the world. The Sharia laws are formed out of the Medinian verses of the Quran and the thousands of hadiths of Muhammad. As a matter of fact, it is a rarity to find a single Sharia law emerging from the Meccan period. All the Sharia laws are based on verses and hadiths that are related to the 10 years that Muhammad spent in Medina. For this reason, today, we find the Muslim terrorists are keen to implement the Sharia laws everywhere, whereas some of the so-called moderate Muslims are reluctant to do so. Let us be clear about this. Islam without the Sharia is no religion at all. That is exactly why many Muslim women do not mind living in Western countries and accepting Western laws, which oppose many of their Islamic laws. That system gives them the one thing sorely lacking in a Sharia society, the freedom from the oppression of their men. Muslim girls, especially those studying in Western schools and universities, always dress up in tight trousers and shirts and only cover their heads with scarves. They freely display their faces, and the shape of their backsides and breasts, believing that those parts don't tempt the men. They believe that the hair is the only sexual part which attracts men, so needs to be covered. This way of dressing has nothing to do with the Sharia law. The Islamic law requires the Muslim woman to cover her entire body from head to toe with cloak or burqa. See Quran Surahs 33, 59, 24, 30, 33, 55. The best way to conclude this chapter is to quote the words of one of my proofreaders who disagreed with my last assertion. After reading this chapter, she writes, Dr. Ahmed, with all due respect, I disagree with the last statement in this paragraph. I do agree seemingly moderate Muslims are reluctant to implement Sharia. However, I believe all seemingly moderate Muslims have great potential to apply Sharia. There is a lot of evidence that is contrary to the last statement in this paragraph, especially in this day and time in the West. In a recent survey conducted by Al Jazeera Net, the website for the Al Jazeera Arabic television channel, respondents overwhelmingly support the Islamic State terrorist group, with 81% voting yes on whether they approved of ISIS conquests in the region, Reuters. In 2013, before ISIS came into existence, a general survey conducted in the biggest 5 Muslim countries, Indonesia, Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. They asked the Muslims of those countries 2 questions. 1. Do you want the implementation of the Sharia laws in your country? And 2. Do you want the establishment of the Islamic Caliphate? Those who answered yes to both questions are 77%.